Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. We got the whole team here tonight to end the week talking training camp. You guys probably haven't seen enough of us, I wouldn't think. But let's say hi to Nate, Geary, and Erik. How you guys doing tonight, guys?
What's going on, Aaron?
Living the dream, brother. Yep.
That's right.
You know.
I know what's going on, man. Dude, football's back. We've all
That's
been
right.
talking in the Slack channel nonstop. We've all been talking on Twitter nonstop. This is what we all live for. The guys that do what we do. This is the time of year that we live for. Get back into football. So before we get into it, though, I want to tell you guys about that Slack channel and tell you to go to cover1.net and subscribe to the premium because you get in the Slack channel. I'm seeing new guys in there all the time, and everybody, it's getting real going right now. And right before the show, people, I see notifications I haven't even seen popping up in there. So
Kyle Orton's name got dropped in the Slack channel just now. So that's what you can expect from the Cover One Slack channel.
I'd pay money just to talk about Kyle Orton. So definitely get over there. And then I think Nate's one of these young guys who's real savvy with the technology, and he loves the Cover One app. So Nate, why don't you tell us about that app since you're the young buck in the group?
I am absolutely the young buck of the group, but I wouldn't exactly call myself tech savvy. I'm usually asking Erik questions. I'm usually texting Erik, yo, dude, what the hell do I do? But yeah, no, the app's great. I always tell people because at this point, we just have so many contributors that we're pumping out. I mean, as of like 3 or 4 months ago, the group was fairly small, and it's like a growing company. You know, when there's demand for a product, like there is like right now during the season, we've just got so many guys pumping out grade A content.
Definitely.
That if you don't have the app, you're just going to be missing out when this stuff comes out. You don't want to be the guy that's scrolling through your Twitter screen and then all of a sudden you see that tweet from 3 days ago. You're like, why is there a tweet from 3 days ago in my timeline? And then, oh, wow, what a great article this was from Erik on cover1.net. So you don't want to be the person that gets to this 3 days late. Get it 15 minutes prior. You know, when the podcasts come out. If you had the app, 15 minutes prior to this podcast, we were hopping on. So for the notifications alone, the app is worth it. But obviously, it's everything, all of our content at the kind of palm of your hand. So definitely do it. The best part about it is it's free. Somebody tweeted at me today, hey Nate, was listening to you on the radio, great job. Wish Cover One had an app. And I'm like, oh brother, they do have an app. You just got to go to the app store. So make sure.
That was weird. They charged that guy $2.99. You told him to DM you $2.99 for the app, but we won't talk about that. Like,
it's free. On air. It's free.
It is free, and I will admit, we did get that tweet earlier, and there's an issue with the Android side of the house, and I have a request ticket in for that. So currently, right now, if you don't already have it on your phone, it's only available right now and at the iTunes store. So, but I'll definitely be sure to let everyone know. I'll even send out a tweet and across all social medias and whatnot, letting everyone know that it is available on Android. We apologize for that, but we'll take care of that.
Oh, yeah, no problem there. So let's get right into it today because the Bills made a little roster move. A guy that we've talked about a little bit here, Rob's boy. I know Rob's going to be upset. I haven't talked to him yet, but I'll butcher his name here. Digizua, something like that. Our boy O'Diggy.
O'Diggy.
I'm gonna. The worst part about this release is that I wanted to say that name all year long, regardless of how he played. But they drop him and they sign Ryan Russell. So what do you guys got for us on Ryan Russell? Because I don't know much about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of his production, obviously he's not someone I really studied. He's been in the league for a few years. He's 6'5", 275, according to Pro Football Focus. Very little production over the course of his career, honestly. And when you're looking at his height, weight, and speed and whatever, he does have that prototypical DN size that McDermott and Frazier like. How explosive he is, how good he is with his pass rush moves, hand usage, and all that good stuff, I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to comment until I obviously watch a film, but you can see some of his stats, his career stats over the course of his 3-year career. He's had 3 sacks, 6 QB hits, 25 QB hurries, 11 stops in total. So he seems like a guy that, is still maybe blooming. He looks like he might have had some injuries over the course of his 3 years. But besides that, I really got nothing on him. I was honestly more surprised about them letting O'Diggy go because you heard so many good things about him the last few months. And just because some of the theories that I had come up with in regards to our DNs dropping a little more in zone coverage, which they're showing more, but something else must have came up where they just didn't like O'Diggy in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, somebody brought it up in the Slack channel when they talked about bringing in Russell and wonder why we're not bringing in other positions that people think are more needs than the defensive line. But I mean, Brandon Beane's been pretty open and honest about what he thinks about bringing in a lot of these guys to keep a fresh rotation on the defensive line. So I'm assuming that's just what this is, just to kind of upgrade that bottom part of the defensive line and just get a healthy rotation. Is there anything deeper than that?
Well, I mean, I could say this. Erik mentioned prototype, and it's funny that he mentioned that. And it's funny that the move happened when it did, because this morning, if you heard Leslie Frazier, whether it was on WGR or if you were watching one on like a Facebook Live or anything like that this morning, Leslie Frazier essentially was talking about the defensive line and talking about, does he have prototype height and weights for each of the positions along the defensive line. He talked about having that they wanted to have 15 guys up front heading into camp. They're at 14 right now. But the idea is I think that they wanted someone with a little bit more size and strength on the outside to go on the opposite side of a guy who isn't that size and strength guy, and a guy like Eddie Yarbrough. And I think this could potentially mean something up the road for Shaq Lawson too, because he's a sort of similar player to Shaq Lawson, where I think he's a bit more stopping the run oriented than he's a run defender opposed to a guy like Adolphus Washington, who adds a little bit more of that pass rushing element from the inside. But I guess my point here is this could be a move that might not bode well for Shaq Lawson if Ryan Russell ends up being a guy that can contribute, which we don't know yet.
Do we know the numbers on this deal? It's probably a pretty.
I would guess veteran minimum.
Yeah, I would think so too. So that
1 year deal. It's a 1 year deal for sure. So
yeah, if that's a financial incentive against, I'm sure Shaq's contract for if you're going to get similar production, there's a financial incentive for that as well.
And honestly, Aaron, when he mentioned Yarbrough and the season he had last year, when you look at the advanced statistics, and of course, I mean, I've watched both guys very thoroughly this offseason, but even for guys that are just going to box score scout, like you look at their statistics against the run, they're pretty similar. And you look at their statistics against the pass, they're pretty close. So again, if they're trying to rotate Eddie in, because Eddie can play both sides, and he did last year. And so if Eddie's their guy, there is a good possibility, as Nate had kind of alluded to, that maybe Shaq's days are numbered. And our Jaden Saravallo actually put an article up today at cover1.net in regards to that. And so go ahead and check that out on the site. But I mean, it's honestly, it's a real good question, because again, if Eddie's their guy and Shaq isn't, I mean, they could quite easily move on from him.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie seems to be doing the same thing he did last training camp as far as making a name for himself in the summer. Yeah, I keep seeing him pop up, making the hustle plays. Nate Geary today certified
hustler
as a certified hustler. That's good enough for me. No, but seriously, and we've been hearing the rumors. A lot of fans have speculated that Shaq's on the trade block. Shaq's a trade asset. I want to hear from you guys on this, because obviously there is some signs, some writing on the wall that, McDermott coming out and saying, I didn't say it, but he's right. This is a make or break season for him. So McDermott doesn't normally talk like that. So there's some writing on the wall. I guess my question, and I'll throw this to Nate to start, I don't believe that Shaq Lawson has any trade value. Do you think there is any value for the Bills, or is it just get rid of him for whatever you can get, some late round conditional pick, and just get him off the books?
I disagree about his value. I think that he does still have value. He's a former first-round pick. I do think that it's definitely not a first-round pick, his value, but I think you could potentially see a conditional day 3 pick moved for Shaq Lawson, or another player similar to him, a first-round pick. And the guy that I keep thinking about is Corey Coleman, who I was reading some things today.
Don't get everyone's hopes up, Nate.
I know. I was just reading some things in Cleveland today that said Corey Coleman had a really good practice today, and he's been turning heads at Cleveland practice, which was about time. But I'm saying a player like Corey Coleman on another team that is similar to Shaq Lawson, that was a first or second round pick that just hasn't that needs maybe a change of scenery. And maybe that's the whole thing with Shaq. And I look at Eddie Yarbrough and I look at Shaq, and I look at two guys kind of going in the opposite direction. And I ask why. And I look at Eddie Yarbrough, and Eddie Yarbrough 2 years ago was cleaning carpets and working out, trying to get another shot in the NFL. And you can't really substitute the drive that Eddie Yarbrough has in a guy like Shaq Lawson, who's really been the best player on his team, his entire life. Then he goes to Clemson, and he's a first-round pick. And then he, just from the beginning, his career here in Buffalo started off poorly. It was the injury right after he gets drafted that it turns out he's going to have surgery. He's going to miss the first 4 months of the season. And for a rookie, that's huge. You're missing your first training camp. That's huge. he's playing in a defense that he didn't fit in. And then they finally changed that defense to get him to fit into something where he's going to play a role in a defensive end role that he's used to playing and he's always played. And it still isn't working. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a matter of a change of scenery. But at this point, I would say his tenure here in Buffalo is closer to the end than the beginning.
No, I have to agree, real quickly. I think I agree with Nate on that. They do come from opposite ends of the spectrum. I do think that they both do appreciate being in the league.
Sure.
But you can tell when you watch from play to play, both those guys, you can tell Eddie, different. You can tell the two differently. I mean, honestly, it's his hustle. And, even today he had a nice batted pass. He does that really well. He's good at timing. He's very in tune to the change from run to pass, the read run to pass. He does a little bit of everything. And you even saw him drop into coverage, as I talked about earlier, and do a good job of getting to his landmarks and reading the, third guy out of the backfield. So I do like Eddie Yarbrough. I have to agree. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they do move on from Lawson here in the next couple of weeks, especially considering how, they last year when they, moved on was from Sammy Watkins,
had the roster purge.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the time.
That's a great point because Tyler brings up in the chat here, how does Shaq look at camp? Still time to have a strong week or preseason game. But if Brandon Beane has his mind made up that this guy's on the trade block, we saw it last year with Sammy. He actually rolled Sammy out and threw him the ball 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
Just to prove the trade value is there.
The thing is with defensive end and defensive line in general, it might be one of the more, and offensive line, those might be the two most difficult positions to try and gain ground on the guy ahead of you, if that makes sense,
Sure.
because there are only certain things that you can see on film and during practice that would make you say, okay, this guy's obviously better. But when you're looking at two players, especially at offensive line, it's not about analytics. It's just like you can physically tell if someone's better than someone else. And right now, he is sort of blending in with the other 4 or 5 guys that are at the position behind the 2 starters. And we know that Trent Murphy's the starter. Both coaches the last 2 days, McDermott and Frazier, both have said Trent Murphy is our starter at the left defensive end position. Not only is a starter, yes, Sean McDermott said he's a 3-down defensive end. That was telling to me. And then on top of that, you add in that they have already said that they want to see Lorenzo. Lorenzo told me personally that they told him that they want to put him in more pass rushing situations this year, hand in the dirt. That means that's more snaps away from Shaq Lawson as well. So at the end of the day, I just sort of wonder, how does he make an impact enough in the preseason here to make this coaching staff say, we need to keep him. If we have an injury, he's our only hope. And right now, that's just not the case.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what kind of value is there because we've been talking about this a little bit on and off in the podcast here. I think, Nate, you and I talked about it when we went over the defensive line. And, I think we're on different ends of the spectrum of maybe where the value is, but maybe they just want to move on bad enough, or maybe you're right and there is some value there that a team sees and wants to take a chance on it. But I think we can all agree that the writing's on the wall. And I don't know that Shaq can do anything in the next 2 to 3 weeks to really change the opinion that if we're seeing it, the guys that are smarter than us that are running the team are seeing it too. So let's get into what everybody really wants to talk about because everybody's on Twitter. We all know what everybody wants to hear about. It's a day-to-day back and forth about quarterbacks and who's playing well. And the quarterbacks are giving us an opportunity to talk about it day-to-day because everybody's stepping up on a different day. So I want to flip it over to Erik here because he's got some video up. What did you guys see at training camp today from the quarterback position?
You know what, Nate, why don't you start us off, man? You were on scene. Obviously, I'm back home. Why don't you start us off with what you saw today from the 3 quarterbacks, bud?
So, here's the thing. I want to be careful of saying that A.J. McCarron had the best day. Like yesterday, where I think it was very easy to tell that Josh Allen had the best day among the 3 quarterbacks, I would say that McCarron had a good day. But the only reason that you could say he had the best day is because he saw the lion's share of first-team reps. In fact, he saw all of them during the team portion of today's practice, where yesterday Josh Allen got in that the last portion of the team, he ran with the ones. That wasn't the case today. AJ got the entire load share of first-team reps today. And one of the things that I talked with Sale about is it appears anyways that AJ understands that he doesn't need to sort of press the issue, that if he can be the steady 5-year veteran that he is and make plays that are smart, make smart throws, make the right reads, put his teammates in the best positions to succeed, like he did today at times, that he can probably play a conservative approach and win this quarterback job outright. My thought is, though, and we've talked about this, Aaron, is how long can that conservative approach stave off or hold off Josh Allen when he's going to be making throws out there that AJ's not willing to make right now? So at the end of the day, I liked what I saw from AJ McCarron. I thought that the offense executed really well. And Erik Wood was, I think he was on, or maybe it was just on Twitter that he was talking with Erik about this, but that the offense is always a little bit, at least to start training camp, behind the defense. That gap shrank a little today. I was actually really impressed. Patrick DeMarco after practice said the same thing, that he thought that the starting offense was executing at a high level today. And I like that we're 4 days into training camp, and you've got guys acknowledging that some of the stuff that they're applying in the classroom is starting to come together and come to fruition on the field.
Yeah, and I was watching some of the clips from practice today, and I grabbed a few of them, and it showed McCarron's, again, command of the offense. You'll see some little things that I brought up here on film of him just having that poise in the pocket, being able to manage the down and distance. On this play, you're going to see the receiver to the top of the screen here just kind of settle in between the zone here in a Tampa 2 zone. As soon as that guy's making his break here to the top of the screen, you're going to see McCarron just hit him. So it's a really tough throw right there. And if you look at the distance on this throw, this has got to be a really good throw. And it's a little high, but you see it's to the inside shoulder, keeping it away from that squatty corner. So, I mean, this is a really nice play here from McCarron. And honestly, I was kind of surprised, because usually this isn't a throw that, he usually makes. He's kind of that game manager, kind of that guy that's going to take what the defense is going to give him. But this is one of those plays. This is a risky throw, and he throws it with confidence and decisiveness.
Sidebar, on this screen right here, it blows my mind to watch Tremaine Edmonds tower over the rest of the team. I just wanted to point that out on the sidelines, literally towering over his teammates. But what I'll notice, and what I did notice today, in seeing more of AJ McCarron, is at times on those short routes, when he's decisive and he knows where he's going with the ball, he has zip to his ball. He doesn't have that same fire that kind of comes out of when it comes out of Josh Allen's hand. But in terms of, if you're comparing him and Nathan Peterman, I think he has a superior arm and plays and throws with more zip than Nathan Peterman does. And that was on display today at times in some of those short, decisive routes that he was throwing.
I want to touch on that real quick, because I do think when he is being decisive on the short routes, on the timing routes, I think that's where his bread and butter is going to lie. But from what I've seen from random clips on Twitter, I'm seeing him, and I don't think it's one of these. This play is not going to be that play, but I'm seeing him not be very decisive and not get the timing down and holding on to the ball too long. And he's not the kind of playmaker that can afford to hold on to the ball long and make plays. And if that continues, I think that the offense will just stall under McCarron.
I think, too, Erik will probably agree with me on this, that McCarron, when he gets a little bit of pressure in his face and he can't fully step into it, that's when he gets in trouble, because he still tries to make the same throw that he knows he can make stepping into it. Right. Much like Nathan Peterman, when there is that muddled pocket, he has difficulty throwing off different platforms, and not being able to step into throws is going to hurt his ability to be effective.
And that's the NFL game, isn't it? You're rarely going to have clean pockets, right?
I mean, his problem is he can't generate enough torque, enough velocity when he doesn't have his base, when he doesn't have his footwork. And that's why when I was watching some of his clips, Nate, it's surprising, because you'll see to the top of the screen, they're sending a blitz. And I think Ryan Groy's in there at center, and you see the pocket, the depth of the pocket is maintained here. It allows him to stand in the pocket with this blitz coming, and he's working through his progressions, and there's no one open. You see everyone is off the screen pretty much, except for this running back leaking out of the backfield. Obviously that's not his first read, his first progression, and he just, drops it out to him. I know there's not much gained on the play, but that is living to throw another down, another down. And I liked that, because he was really calm in the pocket, and he trusted his protection, especially up the middle, when they sent more guys than they, had expected.
I just wanted to make a quick point, too, because you mentioned his name. I thought Ryan Groy had maybe the best practice of any offensive lineman today. He made 2 wow blocks, one on the rookie Tremaine Edmonds, where he literally just tossed him on the ground. Tremaine ended up on his back during a blitz. And then during the one-on-one sessions, I noticed Ryan Groy 2 times not move back 2 yards on a defensive tackle pass rush from Harrison Phillips. Both times I was really, really impressed with Ryan Groy today. So I just wanted to add that in there because I know
and this is
talking about him.
Nate, this is a play against Tremaine Edmonds. He's right there in a double A gap look. He's really low. You can't really see him, but that's Tremaine Edmonds going against Groy right there. And Groy, look at him. He holds his ground. And again, that pocket, that depth of that pocket was maintained, giving McCarron not only time and a good view of the field, but allows him to have that clean footwork so he can make those throws.
And I think this is going to be the thing that the coaches really have to have these conversations that we keep talking about. A guy like McCarron, like you said, lives to see another down. And that is important to a lot of coaches. Where does Josh Allen have that ability to face that type of pressure and see that, hey, I'm just going to dump it here and actually be able to make that throw? That's something that we don't know if he has the ability to do. Obviously, we know he has the ability to make the big play, and the coaches are going to like that. But there's got to be a fine line in between these two somewhere of the conservative game manager and the guy that makes plays.
That was the motion, Erik.
And so I'll lead in because we're going to move on from McCarron. Overall, I mean, it seems like everyone would agree that McCarron probably had the better day, but that wasn't saying much, right, guys?
Yeah, no, and like that was my point is basically he saw the most time. He was consistent. He didn't really wow anybody, but he ran the offense as the way it was intended. And I think that a lot of the move to Nathan Peterman last year was because they thought Nathan could run the offense the way that it was intended to run. And I think that they know that AJ is going to provide that for them.
Definitely. And so I want to switch on the topic to another guy, Malachi Dupre, who seems like he's getting the lion's share at wide receiver. Nate, was that the same status here today out at camp?
Second day in a row, he lined up as the primary number 3 wide receiver behind Jeremy Curley and Kelvin Benjamin. Second day that there was not a rotation. Day 1 and day 2, you saw a little bit of Brandon Riley in that spot. You saw a little bit of Rod Streeter in that spot. You saw a little bit of Cam Phillips in that spot. You did not see that at all. And it's not that Malachi Dupre is out there making plays or making incredible one-handed catches. I think he knows the playbook. I think that he's a former 5-star college recruit that was maybe one of the best wide receivers coming out of high school. Yeah, like he was one of the best players in the country coming out of high school. And obviously he had that big injury last year when he was drafted by Green Bay in the preseason that ended his season. The Bills were able to get him and bring him over here. And I keep mentioning when Brandon Beane does interviews, he has these Freudian slips where he mentions guys by name in positions where, like a lot, he was talking about Mason Rudolph the other day on the radio. He mentions, when he talks about the wide receivers, he mentions Malachi Dupre's name. The 2 times that he talked about it on WGR, in 2 separate interviews, he brought up Rod Streeter and he brought up Malachi Dupre. And I thought that was interesting because now you see Dupre in a spot where I think he has an opportunity to make this roster. And Sal told me this, and of course he didn't say it with any confidence that he heard it from anybody, but he told me he wouldn't be that surprised if Zay Jones didn't start on the 53-man roster to start the season, whether it was because of injury or whether it was because of a non-football injury or whether it's because they decide that he's not providing them exactly what they thought they were getting, especially with the offseason troubles that he's had. Right. I don't know where Zay Jones fits into this whole thing, but I know when he gets back on the field, he's going to be 500 reps behind the rest of this receiver group, and it is a hot battle from 3 to 7. Like, everybody in there is really, really close.
Sure. Hey, Aaron, what are your thoughts on Malachi Dupre? I mean, I have a couple of clips that we're going to go through, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what are they seeing that we aren't? Because I know, yes, he was a 5-star recruit out of high school. Yeah, I know they had a really good workout with him when Beane was with the Panthers. They were very interested in him. And honestly, he was talked about as, I think a second-day prospect, but he ended up going to the 7th round to the Packers. So have you heard anything that, would change your mind or give us an inkling on what they see that we're not really seeing? Because he's not really standing out at camp.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but he keeps showing up. So it's got to be on potential, right? It's got to be on this idea that they see something that in him that they believe that they can get this potential out of him. And because we're not seeing it, we're not hearing his name when you're following on Twitter on camp, you're not hearing, Dupre comes down with this nice catch. I mean, you're hearing it almost from every other guy. You're hearing Streeter having a good day, Riley having a good day, Foster even, these other guys. And so when I'm putting together my, who's going to get cut, I think they may keep 6 wide receivers, maybe 7 max, but I think it's going to be 6. I'm not putting Dupre in there because I'm just not hearing about him. I'm not seeing it, but maybe when they turn on the film, he's doing all the right things, running his routes right, and he's just not getting the ball.
I think you're right. He's probably doing the little things, and that's why I brought this clip up, and I've been waiting to show it because honestly, you see him to the right side of the screen here. He's the innermost slot receiver here, and this is just a swing screen to the far end of the field, and the offense is getting a hat on a hat. So they have three receivers, or three blockers, I should say, because outside is Clay, Patrick DeMarco, and then Dupree's in the middle. Dupree gets matched up versus Matt Milano here, and look at the job he does, stock blocking him. He's engaged here, and then he just rides Milano wide so that Shady can cut back inside. So these are little things that maybe we're not seeing, when you're watching. All you're seeing right now in this play is McCoy making people miss, but little things like that, maybe you're standing out. Maybe obviously the staff sees that, and obviously they hold value in that. But when I watched film on him this offseason, I saw little things like this where he was dropping wide open passes like that. I mean, you can't have that. I mean, that's a wide open play on a smash concept. You make that catch. Little things like that I saw on film over the offseason, and you can see a little better right there. He's just concentration issues. So not that he's had those issues in camp so far from what I've seen. I don't think he has, but those are gimmies. I mean, those are gimmies versus, I think it was Jacksonville State there, Saran Neal's old team. But I do like this. I mean, he initially ran, I believe, 4.5 coming out, but at his pro day or private workout, he ran like a 4.4 something. This one, he just takes a real quick hitch and shows a little speed and a little stiff arm right here, and ends up getting near the end zone there. So
I mean, if that type of potential, that's what they need at the receiver position right there. If they can tap that potential.
So it was interesting because I talked with Taron Johnson yesterday. I talked to Brandon Riley today. They both used the word trust when they talked about how they plan on climbing the depth chart. And I'd have to think that that's something that's going into why Malachi Dupre is in the position he is right now, where it looks like he might have the inside track to the number 3 or number 4 wide receiver position. Is maybe it's to the point, like we talked about that stem block, that stock block you saw in Matt Milano, the previous 2 plays.
Right.
Maybe what it is, Erik and Aaron, is his teammates trust him to be in the correct position, and his position coach trusts him, and that trust then sort of carries over to Brian Daboll, who trusts that not only is he going to be in the right position, that he's going to be a willing blocker and that he's going to contribute. So you talked about the little things, but I think a lot of it could have to do with trust and what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. I think maybe it's probably a lot of the things we're not seeing. And that's what makes it most difficult when, you or I or the national media talk about Josh Allen, or they talk about whomever else when they're trying to evaluate. We just don't know. We see 2 hours. And it's so important to know that these coaches understand, because I saw, was it Jeff Schwartz and was it Dan Orlovsky talking about, like, freaking out on Twitter about how
that was funny.
They just think it's so ridiculous that they're running 3 quarterbacks in with the first team unit. They're not picking anybody. It's like, that's called it's a 3-way competition.
Yeah, 10 years ago, nobody bats an eye at that.
Right, nobody. It's just so crazy, the hyper tension that it is with these people talking, the national media talking about the Bills. Like I don't know. I don't really understand what it is, but it's just like, how many of these guys have 9 wins under the belt as a head coach? It's like, if Sean McDermott thinks that there needs to be a three-person competition 4 days into camp, it's not like we're going into August 23rd and they're still running 3 quarterbacks at the first team. By August 20th, by August 5th, there may be a quarterback that is running exclusively with the ones. We don't know. I think it's premature to really criticize this competition, or really any competition going out at any position right now. It's just too early.
And not to mention real quick, Aaron, I mean, these guys all 3 of them are young. Yeah. So you want to gauge where they are mentally in a new offense. And so I have no problem with them. And again, it is the 4th day. So I think that was an overreaction.
Same.
And of course it's going to garner traction because it involves Josh Allen. So I'm not worried about that. You know what? And Nate, you had mentioned, McDermott winning 9 games last year. Well, yeah, he earned his trust right now in us as fans. Uh-huh. And honestly, if Daboll and that staff, because they had a plan before they drafted any of the quarterbacks in that last draft, they had a plan, and this was part of the plan. Obviously, they're meticulous when it comes to game planning and developing players. So guess what? You got to trust that they know what they're doing and that they're on schedule, and that they're able to adjust that schedule based on the play so far in camp. So if they still believe it should be a 3-man competition, by all means, it should be a 3-man competition.
Absolutely. Yeah. 2 quick points here. I want to get back to Dupree in a second, but to this point about that argument on Twitter, training camp's different than it used to be too, right? These guys aren't out on the field as often and as much as they used to be. There's no 2-a-days. There's none of this stuff. So if you want to take a look at all 3 guys, just do it. Like, I don't think that it's going to lose. I don't think a guy like AJ McCarron's going to lose out by splitting some of those reps with Josh Allen. None of them are getting a ton of reps, but it gets you something to look at on film so you can go back and take a look at that. I have no issues with this at all. I think people are just trying to make a name for themselves on the Twitter.
And quite honestly, dude, like I think of it like this. Which one of these 3 quarterbacks has earned the right to say that they are at least have earned the right to be the just by association that they're going to be the number 1 quarterback until proven otherwise? Like, none of them. AJ McCarron's got the most experience. He's got 5 years experience. He's got 1 playoff game and 3 or 4 starts over the course of his career. Like that, he hasn't done it over the course of his NFL career. Nathan Peterman, I think, was getting the benefit of the doubt because this organization drafted him. So once that benefit of the doubt wore off, which I think it did yesterday, and everything else became equal, I think that's where AJ McCarron's now getting his opportunity.
Sure. And that's just how it's going to be. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to go at it. None of them have established themselves. I mean, really on offense, nobody besides LaShawn McCoy has established themselves as a guaranteed, this is the guy at his position. Obviously, there's some guys that don't have a lot of competition at their position, but he's the only guy that on this offense deserves rest days and deserves days off and things like that. Real quick on the Malachi Dupre thing, because when Erik, when you were talking about him and doing the little things, it kind of reminded me of basketball, and I did a lot of time coaching basketball. And you would get guys that don't show up on stat sheets. Their film isn't sexy, and coaches love them. And I used to love those guys because they were in the right spots. They were picking on the right guy. They were, where they're supposed to be, moving the ball where they're supposed to be. And those things don't show up in stat sheets. They don't show up on Twitter when people are talking about players, but coaches love those guys. So
I have a comment to that, Aaron. Yeah. I totally agree with that, because when I'm thinking back, okay, what does Dupree have that this staff sees? Maybe a guy that's played in the system that, kind of mirrors what Dupree has. And a guy that just kept popping up in my head was Brandon LaFell. And I just see him in that mold, does a little bit of everything, but is not going to be a number 1 and even really a number 2, but it does some little things that can really benefit the offense. So I'm with you. You're right. Those are coaches, players, and they may not show up in the stats, but they can do things that are going to help and help your offense, move the chains, catch a pass that, maybe is not on target, but just do the little things to help your offense overall.
Yeah, and so we don't always see it. So just for fans, because I get caught up in that too, where I'm saying, oh, well, this, Brandon Riley's getting all the tweets. The coaches see things differently than we do. It's not always about, everybody has to produce at a certain level or make spectacular plays. They want guys, like Nate said, that you can trust to do their job when you have to do it and be in the right position.
And I'll tell you what, like Sean McDermott's talked about it a lot, is you just want a guy that you can trust going to do his 1/11th. And that's something that he's talked a lot about last training camp, specifically when he first came in, is we are looking for guys who are going to execute the best at their 1/11th, their duties, and not try to overcomplicate the position and just do what they're asked. And I think that's what you're seeing from Dupree. And, listen, other guys are likely going to get an opportunity. Let's just be thankful that we don't have a coaching staff or an organization that goes on Twitter and uses what other people think to make their decisions. So we don't have to worry about that anytime soon.
So Nate, after going to the practice today and this conversation about Dupree, and you were saying that 3 to 7, I think you said, competition's real tight, real fierce right now. Is this group a little bit more competitive than we thought they would be, or is it still a really bad group? They're just all really bad together.
They're NFL players. They're not going to be as bad as everyone said they were going to be since whenever they've been saying they've been bad. Like,
I agree.
I look at this group. I think Ray McLeod is a lock on this roster. Erik, you could try to tell me that I'm wrong, and I'd probably say, okay, you might be right. But I think that Ray McLeod is locked into that 6th or 5th receiver spot, however many they keep, because of his return ability and his ability to act as a jet sweep guy, as a gadget player on the offensive side of the ball that they absolutely don't have and they need. So considering that means right now, in my mind, that's 4 receivers that are locks on this roster. That's Kelvin Benjamin, Jeremy Curley. I'm going to put Zay Jones as a lock in the roster.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm going to put Ray McLeod. So that means there's 1 or 2 positions left. And I think you have to maybe lock Andre Holmes into one of those positions because he plays special teams and they like him. And Brandon Riley told me today that he was emulating the young receivers last year were emulating their off the field performance, their work in the classroom, how they act off the field after Andre Holmes. Like Andre Holmes was the leader of that group last year. And that's nothing that I heard. That's nothing that either any of us heard
that, yeah.
But that's Brandon Riley telling me that the young guys were looking up to Andre Holmes and how to act and how to watch film and how to be a pro. That says a lot to me. So we know that this organization likes players like that. So that means there's one spot. And does that spot go to a guy like Austin Proehl? I think at this point, probably not. He's, to me, a practice squad guy. Yeah. So then you're down to Brandon Riley. Can he add in the special teams route? I don't know that he can. You have Rod Streeter, who I think a lot of people like. He has the size. He's got good speed. He's a good deep threat, but he hasn't really made the same kind of impact he did last offseason or last training camp before the injury. Otherwise, unless I'm forgetting someone, I don't really think Cam. That's why I just mentioned.
Okay, yeah.
Like, other than like maybe Cam Phillips, who's flashed a little. Everybody's darling of the OTAs, Robert Foster, has gone invisible since he's got his pads on. And Matthew Fairburn joked with me. He was like, "Well, this is where we all lose sight of Robert Foster because he's just not a physical player. When the pads come on, he goes invisible." So now,
not even just pads either, Nate. You saw today at practice. There's a couple passes in a row where he wasn't mentally on the same. Nope. The quarterback. So you talk about the physicality a part of the game when it comes to Foster and what he lacks there, but to me, you got to be on the same page. You got to be mentally in the play. And I saw the clips of practice today, and that was alarming to me, more so than the physicality or lack of physicality on Foster.
Yeah, and Foster got chewed out a couple times by Brian Dable, and it was on a couple of consecutive back shoulder throws where it wasn't on the quarterback. And if you're a fan watching, you're like, wow, that was a crappy throw by Josh Allen. But you didn't see Brian Dable go up to Josh Allen and yell at Josh Allen. He went up to Robert Foster and Cam Phillips, I think it was, like consecutive plays that both misread the coverage and what they were supposed to do. And Brian Dable chewed them out. So, yeah, I think Robert Foster, Cam Phillips, Rod Streeter, like some of those guys are right now on the outside looking in.
See, I find that interesting because I have not considered Andre Holmes as a lock to make this roster at all. I obviously don't have that. I didn't have that conversation with Brandon Riley, obviously, to get some of that more information. But Holmes I get he's a special teams guy, but as far as a receiver, again, maybe he's doing what Malachi Dupre is doing, like you said, just doing all the right things and being in the right spots. But I'm not hearing his name. I'm not seeing anything that makes him stand out.
That's kind of his thing, though.
It is. He didn't last year. You didn't hear anything from him last year, really.
But then you look at the stats, and he's leading the team in red zone touchdowns. So, right. I mean, and the role that they're playing with KB in the slot and that almost quasi tight end we talked about yesterday's podcast, Nate, Holmes is also that guy's been lining up in the slot a lot this training camp as well. And that's kind of the MO of Dable and the Patriots. They like to use those big guys inside, those tight ends, those big receivers, so that they can, run down the seam, clear things out, so that these shifty receivers, the Ray McLeods and the Robert Fosters, and even Shady, which they've lined him up wide almost like every other play. So, I mean, they're trying to use those shiftier guys underneath once those bigger guys clear through. So, although we don't hear about Andre Holmes making many plays, although he made a couple big ones last year, but besides that, he was mainly a red zone guy, special teams guy. So, but this staff loves those guys. I mean, he's the Lorenzo Alexander of the offense. He really kind of is, so.
And Erik, we've talked about it. If you're going to be one of those guys down towards the bottom half of the roster on the depth chart and the wide receivers, you have to play teams, right? And that was my worry with when Foster's doing well early in camp and Riley's doing well. And we know Riley struggled with special teams last year. Is why he ended up on the practice squad, because he put up good receiving during the year, and they needed receivers during the preseason. But you have to be a guy that plays teams. And if you can't, if you're only going to be a guy that sees the field a few times a game when you really break it down, you have to be a guy that contributes on special teams. And I don't know if these other guys can. I haven't seen them. Maybe, Nate, you can tell us if any of those other guys have contributed anything on teams.
The one guy, I have it. We didn't even mention Quan Bray. He's been out there returning kicks, but I don't really see him being much of a factor for this roster. So I look at Proehl. Proehl, I think here's the thing. I think if you look at Proehl and Ray McLeod, you'd like to keep both if it was in your best interest. But then you wonder, if you release one guy to send to the practice squad, who's more likely to get picked up? And I think that's probably Ray McLeod. So I think that's another, kind of X for Ray McLeod and why he makes the active roster. And Proehl likely gets cut / added to the practice squad at the end of this. I do think that Brandon Riley's absolutely got a shot at that last wide receiver position. He's taller than I think I even expected him when I saw him today. Like, he's 6'1", 6'2". Like, he's a little bit bigger than I thought, and he's got good speed. He's always really – I think to me, though, that once we get the first preseason game, that's when the real, I think, separation is going to happen, because Brandon Riley's a gamer. He goes out there and he makes plays when he's going up against the opponent. So, like, that's what I'll be looking for those bottom-tier wide receivers.
Awesome, man. So we got a day off tomorrow, right, for the Bills?
Day off tomorrow. Tuesday is a media only, so it's closed to the public Tuesday. And then Wednesday, it's back to an open practice.
So what are you guys looking for here? You know, I'm going to kick this to Erik first, and then we'll get your thoughts on this, Nate. What are you looking for? We wrapped up a week. There's been a lot of reactions to different things. Obviously, I think now we start to mellow out into camp a little bit. What are you looking for as a coach, a scout here week 2 of camp as we're ramping up for the first preseason game out of these players?
Well, having only 2 days of, pads on, you want to start seeing who's separating themselves on the interior, who's winning on the offensive line and defensive lines. And obviously the offensive line is priority number 1, because you have to find out who's manning the center position, obviously. So that battle, I think, is the battle to watch this week leading up until the first preseason game, because that's going to be very important in regards to what quarterback's going to play, because those two are going to be hand in hand. So I think those two battles right there are so important, not just because quarterback's the most important position, but center, it may be right behind it when you're talking, especially a new offense. And so I think currently right now, in my opinion, I think Bodine has the lead in that department. But from what I saw today on film, Groy did hold it down, especially when we're talking about being aggressive and keeping the depth of the pocket. But I do think Bodine offers a little more versatility from run to pass, and he's played in a system that kind of translates pretty well to what Dable's trying to do. So I would be focused on the offensive line going into the first preseason game.
And McDermott had a quote this week saying, this time of year, you're trying to establish that toughness of your team. We put out the quote image earlier, and that starts up front. So I think that's a great point. I think that's what they're looking for. Nate, what do you think on that question? What are you looking for here week 2 to really push forward into the preseason?
So the slot/nickel corner battle between Taron Johnson and Phillip Gaines is one that I'm really, really looking at, because I was sort of a little surprised when the first day on camp that I saw on Saturday. Phillip Gaines is small. Like, he's like,
he's a little thinner than what you thought.
He's thin. Like, I didn't want to mean like he's short. Like, he's like 6'1", 6'2". He's actually kind of tall, but he is lanky. Like, he's like $180. Like, he's thin.
I agree.
Where I saw Taron Johnson is got that like 5'10", 5'11", but he's a little bit thicker, and he's also a very, very willing tackler. I also think he's a hungry player. So that position battle in and itself, I'm looking forward to, because Taron Johnson started to get his first team reps today, noticeable first team reps, and Chris Brown on BuffaloBills.com also noted that as well. So that's a battle I'm keeping an eye on for. I'm also kind of keeping an eye on that left guard position. They moved. I thought them bringing Marshall Newhouse in meant that they were going to play him at right tackle, but that has exclusively been Connor McDermott behind Jordan Mills at right tackle. Marshall Newhouse is the number 2 left guard right now, which I find to be pretty interesting. I didn't really suspect him move inside at this point in his career. I don't love Vlad Dukas in that position, and I'm pretty shocked to see that they are exclusively playing Wyatt Teller on the right side. I thought that he was going to be a shoo-in to be the second left guard, with the idea that maybe by midseason he's worked his way into a starting role at left guard. But I haven't seen him rotate at all on the left side. He's been exclusively on the right side. So that is also something I'm kind of watching here as this next week plays out.
That's interesting. I am definitely with you on that nickel, that cornerback position, because I think that's my biggest concern on this defense right now. And you haven't heard much about it. And, I have major concerns about Gaines.
Me too, man. I mean, he really.
I do too. And here's the thing: they don't run dime. They don't. They don't run dime packages. What they do is they run a 1 high safety and they bring Poyer down, because or they bring Hyde down. They actually have the versatility to do that.
Yeah,
I would say they're like probably one of 2 or 3 teams in the entire league that can have either guy come down and essentially play your dime corner. So they don't run dime. So that number 3 corner is a big, big role in this team. And we've talked about it. The nickel is essentially their base package now. So this is a player that's going to get a 60% share of plays defensively at the minimum.
Yeah. And I do encourage people, if you can, go listen to the interview. Nate, you had Taron Johnson on the show on Saturday,
Yep.
and I caught that while I was driving, and I loved the way he talked about the role of the slot cornerback and how much there is to do, because Erik and I have talked about it a bunch. I think fans just see that as that's the third best
corner, right?
But they have it's so much to do, and it really glues the linebackers and the cornerbacks and the safeties, everybody together. Yeah. And it's such an important role in this defense that I really hope somebody steps up and really solidifies themselves as that. I hope we don't go into third, fourth training camp or preseason game and they're kind of battling.
Yeah.
For that. I want somebody to really step up and take that position.
And I'll add about the Taron Johnson. I was not impressed with him. I was not impressed when I was there with him. I thought he struggled in man coverage, and he was not walling off the middle of the field like they need him to as a slot corner. I was worried about him, with speed guys, and that was evident, and so much so that even Riley beat him a bunch of times at the top of routes, at the top of read routes or option routes. So he worries me. Gaines has always worried me. I think he's worried every Bills fan. He's a guy. He was one of the 3 guys I picked on the Athletic Buffalo that I was going to be watching at camp, and he didn't impress me either. So I agree with all of you guys. That nickel position is very, very much up for grabs right now, and it's worrisome because teams are going to go right at those two.
There's a guy sitting at home just waiting for a call.
Hashtag Leonard Johnson. There's your plug.
Leonard Johnson. And what I'll say too is with the slot corner position that is so difficult is they're a player that's expected to be able to open their hips either way and potentially have to run with receiver up to 20 yards. You don't have to say that about an outside corner. Like most of those guys, especially in these zones, in these deep third zones, and the quarters defense, like they're opening up one way and they're shuffling out. Like these guys aren't asked to open their hips left and right and be able to run with a guy either position. And that is, advantage slot receiver in that play because you have the ability to go either way. But what I'll say too about Taron Johnson is I'm also a little worried. He doesn't, although he's a little bit thicker, he doesn't really boast that big size or that speed
or length. I mean, he's got like 3.5-inch arms or something like that.
So I would be surprised. I was surprised they didn't tender or bring back Leonard Johnson, if I'm being honest.
No, I'm telling you, man. We've been talking
especially
about
because he was a Carolina guy. But and that was the other thing too. What did I want to talk about before we got off about the Panthers?
Well, you think about that too. Johnson also, not just being a Carolina guy, having trust in the staff has trust in him, which we talked about with the wide receivers, trusting that he knows what he's going to do. He also played pretty well. I know fans got ripped on him for a few times. He got in some bad matchups last year, but he's a solid tackler and he was always in position to make a play.
Well, go ahead, Nate.
I was going to say, admittedly, I was a fan of Kevon Seymour in the slot, but that's just me.
Yeah, it depends though, because like Johnson's really good in zone. If his eyes are on the quarterback and he's keeping the ball in front of him, he's making a tackle. He's a guy that can play off the edge there and make those tackles right on the fringe, the tackle box. But when teams went to went at him and we're in man coverage, we were screwed. He got toasted. But you got to ask yourself, okay, if because they looked at camp that the defense is playing a lot more man coverage than what I remember seeing last year. And with that said, are we in a better position with these two guys, Gaines and Johnson, than we were with Leonard Johnson? I don't think we are. I think that Gaines can run with just about anyone, but he gets lost in the route running. Guys can shake him pretty easily. And then you talk about Johnson when he's trying to be physical and disruptive at the line of scrimmage and press man, those short arms and his inability to flip his hips, like Nate said, and run with people. It does worry me, especially when we're talking over the middle. And you saw a bunch of blitzes today by those inside backers where the middle of the field's wide open. Can we trust him? And I think that's something you talked about on your show, Nate, is, he wants his guys to trust him. And I just haven't seen it yet, but it's early on.
It's early. It's his fourth practice. And that's what we have to keep in mind.
And you guys talk about the coverage and keeping with guys and moving your hips. But most importantly, I think right now for this cornerback group is the improvement we saw with this new group was tackling last year and a year ago. And maybe they gave up some catches, but they're always in a position to make plays and tackle and wrap guys up. And Johnson was a big part of that. And I don't know that the two new guys here, Gaines and Johnson, will be able to do what Leonard Johnson did as far as the tackling side of things, especially in the run game. He stepped up big in the run game with tackling as well, and you need that from your defensive backs. So let's get to some of these questions here. We have, if you guys don't know, we have a Slack channel. If you're a premium member, you can get in there and talk to us. And before we go live, whenever we're doing a pod, even if it's a last minute one, we hop in there and let the guys know we're gonna rip one up and see if they have any questions first. And then we kick it over here to the YouTube channel. So Garrison from our Slack channel asks, he asked a bunch of questions, but we're gonna break him down a little bit.
He always does.
Which is great. We love him, man. I'll wake up 7 a.m. and have a bunch of questions from the guys out on the West Coast. I love it.
Yeah.
So how does Star look? Which is a name that I have not heard at all so far. And even now it is good news, but now that we got the pads on, pads are on, I want to hear a little bit.
I'll start with Star and Phillips. When I was there yesterday and they were working on one-on-ones versus the offensive lineman, I was pretty impressed with Star. He obviously shows his power, and that's his power move. You know, it's a bull rush. But he pulled this move. I think it was on. It might have been on Bodine, where he did a Reggie White hump move. So he just totally torqued him out of the way, and he's right at the quarterback. It was that easy for him. He's that strong. Harrison Phillips, to me, because I saw him down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. To me, seeing him in person again, he looks trimmer. He looks quicker. And so when they put him at shade nose tackle and working on those one-on-ones, he seemed a lot quicker than what I remember at Mobile, because I watched him closely because I knew the Bills were enamored with this guy.
He's relentless.
Having coaching connections at Stanford. So I was pretty surprised how quick he looked in person from January in Mobile to now. So those two guys, I think we're in good shape this season and probably for the next 2 to 3 seasons.
I saw a picture of Harrison Phillips, and I thought he was bulkier, not fatter. I thought he was fatter than he is. Honestly, and then when I saw the picture of him, I don't know that the guy has much more body fat than some of the skill position players. Like, he is just a stack of muscle.
He was doing before, I was actually right before practice started. I got in a little late and I went over to the WGR tent, and there was a couple players in the game field warming up. And Harrison Phillips was one of those guys, and he had like a 4.5 foot pad that he was just jumping from a still position up onto the pad right before practice.
Really?
And he was doing it, dude. I'm telling you, it's like 4.5 feet high, and he was getting up there making it look easy with his pads on. All of his pads were on. So I was like, okay,
that's awesome.
Wow.
That's explosion. He's working on his get up. So that's explosion. That's like basketball stuff, right, Aaron?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. No, I was just saying, like, I would love him as a power forward. In my head, I'm saying, wow, man, that a guy with that athleticism and that size, it's so rare, and that's awesome. And then you add the motor with it, right? You can't teach that mental toughness. Yeah. Another guy with a motor, I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on. If you guys aren't subscribers to The Athletic, definitely some great content over there. Fairburn had that article on Trent Murphy today, just talking about him, and that to me screamed process. That guy is it did like that. I can tell why they fell in love with him and why they said, no, this is a 3-down guy. This is our guy. Did any of you guys get a chance to read that?
Yeah, I definitely did. And, it's a great piece and something he's been working on for a couple of days. And I couldn't agree more. He bleeds process, honestly. But what I do like about him, and it's something we kind of touched upon with Shaq Lawson, is his ability to not only stop the run, but when, teams attack us, when they do those play action fakes, a lot of times those edge rushers will lose those speed rush abilities because of, they have to worry about the run gaps. Well, he's a guy that can transition from run to pass on those play action fakes and win with his hand usage, win with his technique. And he always has a good plan. He knows how to counter offensive linemen. He knows he scouts those offensive tackles so well that he knows what to counter with. And, it's something that showed up on film. And I did a film breakdown on him. If you guys haven't seen it yet at cover1.net, just go ahead, go to the search bar, type in Murphy. You'll see it. Tons of film from his last couple years when he was healthy. And he's just a guy I think not only fits the blueprint as far as character goes, but what they're asking from their base defensive ends as 3-down defensive linemen.
I also think, I was going to say, he sort of got an unfair rap in Washington. Yeah. Obviously, the injury happened. That is, pound for pound, one of the deepest defensive lines in all of football right now. And I think that he was likely, to be honest with you, I just think he was one of the odd man out in Washington. I mean, this is a team that's been just piling draft pick, first round and second round draft pick after first and second round draft pick into the defensive line. He's a player I'm most excited about because he just brings that relentless work ethic that I think this organization is it's so funny because I go back to when the Bills courted and essentially just wouldn't let Mario Williams leave, and now you think about that type of player. This organization wouldn't even entertain having a conversation with that type of player, the type of player that's a me player. Like this is quite the opposite of a me player. I think he really embodies everything they want.
Yeah, and you guys talk about all the things that the process, right, like that fit that. And the one quote in the article that really stood out to me was Micah Hyde talking about that this team is built with guys that they all consider themselves rejects from the place that they came from. And you play with that chip on your shoulder. Anyone that's played sports knows when you play with that something to prove, you might not have the talent, like you said, of a Mario Williams. You might not have that athleticism, but when you play with that chip on your shoulder and you're a hard worker, that stuff is legitimate and it really pays off. And you have a group of those guys that believe that and buy into that. Hey, we weren't wanted. We got to go out and prove it. That's where you get a team that everyone projects to be a 4-win team, wins 8-9 games. That is where that comes from, of taking a roster that isn't that good and making them better.
No doubt about it, man. I totally agree. There was a great article by Fairburn, did a good job of researching that, and I had some really good lines and quotes. So definitely check that out at the Athletic Buffalo. And I should be having a piece that's going to drop here pretty soon, probably in the next few minutes, in regards to Nate, Brian Dable's offense. So definitely, if you're not a subscriber to the Athletic, you're missing out, because honestly, I never used to really read the local newspapers or whatever, but the staff that the Athletic put together, not just Buffalo, the staff overall, the national coverage is phenomenal. I mean, I told Aaron, I'm reading stuff from other writers for other teams because it's that good, and they're so in depth. There's stuff that obviously falls right in line with our mission here at Cover One. So definitely check it out. And obviously Vogel, Fairburn, I mean, all those guys over there, Tim Graham. Yeah. I mean, there's so many phenomenal writers in Athletic Buffalo and just the national coverage. So I'll just read it.
I just wanted to say the breaking and the surprising thing is that you can find time to read things.
I know, right?
He's like, right now. But I was reading that, that 2,000 word Fairburn piece. Did you read it yet? Eric's like, yeah, I read it when I woke up this morning. I was on the toilet and I read it.
Well, I was crushing film on the toilet. Yeah.
Multitasking, boys.
Real quick here before we wrap this up, I do want to get this one question out there because it's a guy that a lot of our fans here at Cover One don't get to see his name all that much because he's not out there doing the podcast and things like that. But I think he's one of the most vital parts of the Cover One team, and that's Vance Reeds. He's our editor, and he makes everybody sound smart. Essentially, he makes it sound like we know what we're talking about as far as grammar and all that stuff. And
my goodness,
he's one of the hardest working dudes.
Oh my goodness, you have no idea. He's been there since day one, and I'll admit that. I remember a real quick story. I was, posting my stuff on Reddit, trying to get to meet people there and discuss some of the topics there. And Vance sent a message to me a few weeks in and said, "Hey, I know that, you don't really, you're kind of getting going now. Do you need someone to help edit your stuff?" I go, "Yes, I'm a terrible writer. I definitely need you." And he's been on board since, and he's been a trooper for us. And you're amen, brother. Thanks for bringing that up. He's been a critical piece to this ascension and bringing all these contributors on, because those guys, him and Rob Quinn, are our main editors. Those two guys, they really hold it
hard
down.
Working, man.
Oh my goodness. You guys don't see half of it.
Yeah, and they have to yell at us all the time because when I make posts, I know I'm not doing what Rob tells them to. So I want what Rob tells me to. So I want to apologize for that. But Vance had a question for us. I wanted to give him the spotlight here for a minute because he's such a good dude. He asked, "What are your starting offensive line projections?" So Nate, we'll start with you, and then we'll kick that over to Erik.
Dawkins, Ducasse, Groy, Miller, Mills. That's my five. I think that's your ideal five too.
Yeah, I mean, I would just swap out Bodine. I agree.
That's surprising. That's surprising.
I don't want it to be based on what everyone has said, but I've seen the two offenses, and I spoke with Erik Wood about it, and just his intelligence and the scheme he's played in, the balance over in Cincinnati. I think he does edge out Ryan Groy.
Do you think Bodine's relationship with McCarron, if McCarron's the starter, having that relationship, do you think that'll affect who becomes the starter if McCarron is the starter?
Oh, I don't think it affects it, but I think once they are named starters, I think it does absolutely help them. Yes, yeah. I don't think one actually causes the other.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm sure Vance will be happy to know that his name got mentioned here and his question got answered. So if you want your questions answered in that same way, head over to the Slack channel. But the only way you can do that is if you join our premium content. Right now, you can go over to cover1.net and check it out. $10 gets you premium content for the whole year. I mean, it's really a deal you can't beat. I've got subscriptions to all kind of, my wife and I were just talking about the amount of money I spend on subscriptions a year and Cover One.
Aaron's getting cut.
I know. I'm cutting down stuff. I might not be in the
cut
Slack.
off, Erik. You're
I
cut
might not
off.
be in the Slack channel much longer, guys. But Cover One for $10 for the whole thing. It's really one of the best deals out there. I've spent more on draft guides and training camp guides in the past. So definitely get on that. While you're looking up Cover One, go head over and subscribe to this podcast. If you enjoyed listening to us tonight, go subscribe to the podcast. Go check out our archive of stuff. We had some great content this week. Head over to the YouTube channel. What Nate and Erik did last night was one of the hottest pieces.
That was good.
It was freeze is what I saw online.
I tried to do fire with a bunch of E's, and then
Twitter's got to fix.
Twitter's
got to get us an edit button, but no, definitely head over to the YouTube channel and also subscribe there and hit the notifications button too, because you'll get notified when we go live. Because sometimes Erik will just hit one of us up and say, "Hey guys, I got my hands on this film. I want to go live." So if you have that notifications button pressed, you'll get that notified to your phone or your computer when we
at any time. Eric's just like, "Yo, Aaron, you want to get on a podcast?" And Aaron's like, "Yeah, let me give my son that special bottle. We'll get him to sleep early, and we will go right away."
Just go to bed. So anyways, guys, you know where to find us on all your social medias. Nate, do you got any other content besides podcasts coming out this week you want to share?
I have my weekend camp observations that'll be coming out probably tomorrow morning. And it'll be a good day tomorrow for content, probably across all spectrums because there's no practice. So a lot of people will probably be dropping their stuff off tomorrow. So make sure, and I'm sure I won't be the only one dropping stuff on the site tomorrow. So.
And I know you're famous, but for anybody that doesn't know you, where can we find you?
I'm at Nakiri WGR. If you want me to answer you, just talk some shit to me, and I'll definitely respond.
He will absolutely respond. And obviously, you know where to find Erik if you're here. Cover One, and you follow all of us over on all the social media networks. If you're looking for me, I'll be all up in Nate Geary's mentions, just with witty comments. So that's where you can find me.
Just creative gifts.
Yeah. No, but you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. And stay tuned, guys, because we're going to have a lot more content coming up. And we really appreciate you guys coming out and listening to us and getting in that chat room, because we can't do it without you guys, as always. And we'll be seeing you next week. Thanks a lot, guys.